Well, welcome to the Sheldonian. I have to say, this is one of the most fun bits of the whole summit, and you're going to have a lot of fun. And obviously, this is the penultimate bit of the summit, because after this, you get to be wined and dined in the Ashmolean Museum. Now, the Sheldonian is the ceremonial heart of the University of Oxford. It was designed by Sir Christopher Wren, the famous English architect, who was the architect of St. Paul's and many other famous buildings in London and elsewhere. And it's where our parliament meets. We have a kind of a funny parliamentary democracy at the university, and our parliament's called Congregation, and this is where Congregation meets. This is obviously also a theatre, and it's used regularly for performances. And it's also where we get our degrees. So what happened, you were in the divinity school just through that door beforehand, and what happens when we get our degrees is that we were in our old gowns and we get new ones. So we sort of come in, go back into the divinity school, get our new gowns, come in, and that's part of the ceremony. Anyway, so you've seen sort of some of the key bits of the historical magic, ceremonial magic of Oxford by coming to these venues. Now I'm going to hand over to Noah, who is a former past president of the Oxford Union, which is the famous debating society. And then Emiliya has agreed to chair, and then you'll hear about the debate and the motion. I'm going to have to run very quickly to make sure we meet the timings for the Ashmolean. So we'll be finishing at 7:15 on the dot, and then all going quite quickly to the Ashmolean, which is a short walk away. So without further ado, Noah, over to you.
Thank you. I'm just going to tell you the rules, so no need for applause. Thank you, Ben. It's a real privilege to be here. I'm really excited for the debates. You'll hear what the motion is shortly. You'll hear what is going to be debated. The way it's going to work is very simple. We're going to hear from people who support the motion. We're going to hear from people who are against it, or in the reverse, perhaps. They're going to take turns. They're going to hash it out. And at the end, you're going to decide who the winner is. And you're going to decide in a way that we will share when we get to that point. So be thinking, as this is happening, who do you agree with? Not based on your personal preconception, but based on the quality of the arguments that are being put to you. So that's what they're going to do. But you also have a role here, and I encourage you to take that role. The first role you have is the opportunity to offer points of information. Points of information. What that means is if somebody on either side says something that you think is not true, or it is inaccurate, or it's a misinterpretation, you can put your hand up and you can say, point of information. Just say that, and then our speakers will determine whether they want to accept or deny that point of information. Very important that you allow them to do that. If they accept it, you can say, in a very, very concise and pithy way, what your point is. It's not a question, it's not your opinion, it's a specific clarification or accuracy point. If they accept it, you say it. If they deny it, you sit down. So that's your first job. Your second job, or opportunity, is actually to deliver a short speech yourself. While these folks will sort of carry the mantle of delivering long speeches, they'll speak for 10 minutes each, you have the opportunity to deliver short 2-minute speeches at a specific point in the debate, which will be clear to you when we get there. You will also have to choose in that moment whether you're going to offer your views on the proposition side or on the opposition side. So equally, while you're listening to these folks, be thinking about what you might want to contribute on one of the sides, because we want this obviously to be interactive as well as a showstopper from these folks here. So that's the other thing that you need to do. The third and final thing, I mentioned it at the start, is you're going to be voting at the end. So I hope that's really clear in terms of what we're expecting from you. I'm really excited to hear from these guys. They've been preparing a lot. It's already getting very, very competitive and very, very heated. So let's not constrain it anymore. Let's let it rip. I'm going to hand over to Emiliya, who we're very, very lucky to have as a chair. She's going to introduce the debate and our speakers. Thanks.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Ben. So I'm excited to hear we're going to be raising the already warm temperature in this room. I'm here with my big hook, basically, to drag anyone who breaks the rules and also to introduce the motion. So we're here to consider the proposition on whether this House believes the global ESG backlash is justified. And I will call on the first speaker to start on the debate. The first speaker for the proposition, Nikki Bartlett of CDP.
Madam Chair, Mr. Secretary, my fellow distinguished speakers, and esteemed guests. It's my honor to be the first speaker for this afternoon's debate, and it's really my honor to propose the motion. But first, it falls to me to introduce the speakers of the opposing side. Firstly, we have Kingsmill Bond. Now, I am sure that many, many of you have heard him speak very eloquently about so many things, particularly about unburnable carbon. And I am no doubt that he will be confident that he is right. He will no doubt have a bucket load of stats, and he will be supremely charming. I urge you, scratch beneath the surface, beneath the mist of statistics he may throw at you, and don't fall for his argument. Secondly, there will be Ellie Herrington, who I had to go and read up about, and it was rather alarming, really, in one of the interviews. Do you know that she says she reads a book a day on top of the newspaper? And she has also danced with 2 out of 3 of these people, Kylie Minogue, Slash, and James Brown. Take from that what you will. She is currently the head of academic engagement at the Centre for Climate Engagement at Hughes Hall, University of Cambridge. And my old friend, Anthony Hobley, who is now doing something terribly smart at Howden, I think. And I met Anthony a million years ago at my very first climate negotiations in Poznan. I didn't know what I was doing. I met him in the security queue, you don't remember. And he was doing something vague on carbon markets at the time. And the first thing he showed me was where you could get a good drink. So I don't know what that says about Anthony or carbon markets, but I'll leave that with you. So the motion today is so clearly a simple one to prove that I'm not sure why we are even here. This House believes that the global ESG backlash is justified. Given how obvious the motion is, I truly wonder whether we need to say any more. But given we have the time, and it is our job to really prove that truth to you, I have a duty of care to that truth, and so I will undeniably lay out that proof. First, let's define the motion. Let's be really clear what we're talking about. ESG. Not sustainable investing. Honestly, not impact investing, not climate investing, not integrating climate risk into financial statements, none of those things. And the opposition may seek to confuse you with those very laudable aims. We definitely need all of those things, but that is not what we're here to debate. Secondly, global. Is it global? A lot of people think that it's not a backlash across the globe. But interestingly, over the last 2 years, there is an annual survey, the Oxford GlobeScan Global Corporate Affairs Survey, which surveys 245 corporate affairs offices globally. Between last year and this year, the backlash that has been mentioned as becoming significant in Asia, Pacific, and Africa is also on the increase, in fact, almost doubling in perception. So let's define the backlash. I think the backlash has 3 aspects in the definition. The pushback against greenwashing, the confusion around what ESG actually is, and then finally, of course, potentially linked to the first 2, you have the backlash in the most recent backlash in the US and the EU, where yes, definitely there is proof of bad actors, and we would say was really easy to achieve because of some of the first 2 reasons for the backlash and the confusion in the first place. Ultimately, we have created a world of increasingly ideological perspectives, more and more prescription in frameworks, and this has driven a wedge into the movement by isolating large parts of society. So rarely have those 3 words caused as much confusion and controversy as E, S, and G, environmental, social, and governance. It means so many things to so many people. On the one hand, if you're an asset portfolio manager, a data provider. It means integrating environmental, social, and governance issues, taking those into account when trying to assess the potential risk-adjusted returns of an asset. That's potentially one end of the spectrum. You would think that that would be your job if you're an analyst. I mean, weather, corporate culture, governance, fairly fundamental to the job of an assessor. Then at the other end of the spectrum, we have that which focuses on ethical and green and impact and commitments and etc., etc., etc. This lack of precision has made for excellent marketing claims and fascinating graphs showing how ESG funds have outperformed some similar benchmark. I have used that graph so many times myself. On the other hand, it has also meant that those who seek to take this stuff seriously, whether to drive up capital to decarbonization, to de-risk the economy, or to manage a disorderly transition, they have actually found this umbrella term, this broad umbrella term, appropriate, given the complex nature of some of these issues. At the same time, though, they have been seeking to ensure that the claims made by companies are true and credible and justified. Given that it has meant so many things to so many people, it is not surprising that a whole industry has sprung up around it. And trust me, I come from an industry that pretty much ate frameworks and assessments and scoring before it even had breakfast. So I know what I'm talking about. The debates have been endless. We should only focus on carbon. We can measure it. No, we must make it only environmental. Yes, but diversity on boards really matters. And what about good governance? Now, how do you make social aspects fundamental? How do you define them globally in different cultures when different parts of a social framework may be more important or valued? What about governance? Every corporate code and every corporate culture in every country is very, very different. How are you supposed to create a framework that covers all of that everywhere, all at once? So what we're saying is that the ESG backlash is not recent. It has been going on for decades. Well, more than a decade at least. I know, having been stalked by journalists for over 10 years, doing terrible things like scoring companies and daring to start the Science Based Targets Initiative. That backlash has been going on for a very long time, and many of the claims made and the pushback have been credible because they're asking the right questions. Are the companies truly doing what they said they would do? That is where that backlash has come from. It is justified. So we are saying it's defined in so many ways. One can accuse it of being prescriptive, ideological, and so broad you can drive a truck through it all at the same time. It's created confusion, a lot of marketing and fluff, spurned a massive rating and assessment industry screaming for data about everything. The world, meanwhile, has increased its emissions. Capital to fossil fuel companies have increased from major banks. Diversity on boards has not increased significantly anywhere, and deforestation has not declined. I could go on and on and on. The next two speakers, Alex and Jakob, will flesh out these points more clearly. But I implore you, Madam Chair, my fellow debaters and members of the audience, if we truly care about sustainable finance, let's admit our failings on ESG. Let's embrace the next chapter of meaningful action. I had to leave out a bunch of stuff.
Thank you, Nikki. Next, we have the first speaker for the opposition, the aforementioned Kingsmill Bond from Ember. Please welcome him.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And thank you for the introduction. It's very kind of you. Wait till you have to hear what I have to say. But anyway, it falls upon me, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce our dear opponents in this debate. And I want you to join me in saluting the three high priests of the ESG movement. The three high priests there. We have Moses, Aaron, and Cassandra in our very midst in Oxford. And please be gentle with them, because they have kindly, and only for the sake of debate, agreed to argue against the world they have been building for the last 20 years. I will avoid any ad hominem attacks, except, of course, on Jakob. So we have Nikki Bartlett, who is the former CIO of CDP. We have Alexis Barkawi, who is the founder of CEP. And then we have Jakob. We have Jakob Thomä, professor in practice at SOAS, as well as a singer and a brilliant comedian. And I urge you not to be swayed by his jokes and his shoes, but by the arguments that we will be presenting. So, ladies and gentlemen, to set the scene, I have 4 arguments I want to set before you. I'm going to talk about justice, and then I'm going to look at the politics, at the problems that ESG is trying to solve. Then I'm going to argue that we need evolution, not revolution. And then I'm going to conclude with the answer, with a suggestion on how to improve ESG. And you may be surprised, given I have a kind of green background, that I'm not actually going to be a fluffy idealist arguing about morality. This is going to be a hard-headed, realist argument about the energy future, how to get energy security, and how to win. So let me start with the first argument, justice. The motion is that the global ESG backlash is justified. Justified means that some higher power has justice on their side. This is, ladies and gentlemen, an outrageous motion. You cannot possibly, in good conscience, vote in favor. So let's talk about justice. The attack on ESG, as we all know, is part of a package of attacks on the weakest and the most vulnerable by the very dangerous people who run the MAGA movement. Other weapons in their armory include defunding US aid, defunding Medicare, forwarding up to Putin, alleging that Ukraine started the Russian invasion and throwing Zelensky to the wolves. This is the justice of the people leading the backlash against ESG. But it's not justice, it's power. It is power. It's the law of the playground bully who says that might is right. But might is not right. We're in Oxford. We stand for truth in the face of power. I put it to you that to vote in favor of this motion is to stand on the side of injustice. I urge you to vote no to those who argue that might is right. So, as to my second argument, what is the issue that ESG is trying to solve? Amidst all this talk, I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about the many, many failings of ESG. We must not forget that there is a fundamental issue at the heart of a capitalist society, which is that capitalism doesn't price externalities. Raw capitalism encourages you to pollute rivers, to pour pollution into the sky, pay no taxes, and cut down the Amazon rainforest. Now, ESG is simply the latest in a long line of attempts to provide some balance against raw capitalism. In the 19th century, factory owners were outraged when governments brought in legislation to stop 10-year-old children from working 12 hours a day. The cigarette industry fought tooth and nail to prevent the risks and dangers of their products from being understood by the public. And now, the fossil fuel industry is using the same tactics and the same people in order to pollute with impunity. And the remarkable thing is, we know what to do. We've figured out ways to make our energy cheaper, fairer, and better. And the only thing standing between us and safety is the network of lies and misinformation. So think very carefully before you endorse the backlash against humanity. Okay, my third part, I'm going to get on to some slightly different angles. It's about evolution, not revolution. So it's very easy to pick holes in the way that ESG has been implemented. I've done so myself actually many times, and I salute our opponents for their amusing and ruthless observations of its difficulties. Some companies have indeed gamed the system. Some rating agencies have focused on making money, not solving fundamental problems. And some ESG has been like medieval scholars in this very university trying to figure out how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. And And so it is with all human systems. Accounting systems did not spring from the cradle fully formed. Modern medicine had to understand the circulation of the blood before we could do open heart surgery. We evolve, we change our systems over time to take account of weaknesses and new technologies. And so it is with ESG. The fact that it's not perfect in no way justifies the extraordinary backlash of vitriol and aggression which characterizes the debate at present, and which I know people in this room have to handle every day. We need to evolve. We need to improve the way the ESG operates. We need to standardize, smooth out weaknesses, curtail abuses, and make it run more efficiently. And in fact, we actually need to ramp up our ability to make polluters pay. And finally, let me come to what I promised at the beginning, the answer, or an answer, a suggestion as to what we should do. So there is an expression in French, un train peut en cacher un autre, which I hardly need to translate for Oxford, but anyway, one train can hide another. So the idea is that by focusing exclusively on one point, you may lose sight of the second train that's about to come and hit you. And that's also true in the world of ESG. And the second train, I would say, is the development by China of a suite of extremely successful modular energy technologies, which constitute the greatest revolution in energy since the exploitation of fossil fuels at the end of the 18th century. The growth of Chinese solar, batteries, wind, electric vehicles, and grids is shaping an entirely new energy system, one where the eternal and enormous resources of solar and wind provide all of our energy, and human ingenuity figures out how to harness this with electricity in one sector after the next. So occupied are we with the battles of the culture war that we're not alive to the risk that Chinese leadership poses to the West. Because make no mistake, energy is power. This country rode the last energy revolution to create a global empire. And those who exploit the great energy inventions of the 21st century will no doubt seek to do the same. So we need to pivot, and we need to pivot fast to reform our energy systems if we want to have any hope of retaining sovereignty or solving the fundamental problems of the modern world. I have a very simple solution, which cuts the Gordian knot of complexity and may help you in your daily work. And that solution is we need to tweak the acronym ESG from ESG to EST, Energy System Transition. And because it's a new energy system that will unlock the cheap energy and the local energy, which will make possible the deeper societal goals of justice and fairness and enable us to stop destroying nature. So let me conclude. Oxford is a city of thinkers and idealists which has shaped the world for the better. From Bentham's utilitarianism to Isaiah Berlin's concept of liberty, from Boyle's law, again just down the road, to Florey's discovery of penicillin and Sarah Gilbert's COVID vaccine, we have debated and sent our best ideas, our hope, and our idealism out into the world. This is not the time to be siding with MAGA-chasing radicals who wish to tear down the entire edifice of thought upon which our civilization is based. This is not the moment to hand the mantle of justice to the deliverers of evil. Now is the moment, ladies and gentlemen, I have nearly finished. Now is the moment to rethink, improve, and move on to a better solution which solves the real problems and will shape a world we can all live in. I urge you to vote against this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite the second speaker to continue the case, Alex Barkawi of the Council of Economic Policies.
Dear colleagues, what a roller coaster from high priest to deliverer of evil. And also an honor, Ben, to probably get as close to an Oxford degree as I could ever be. Thanks a lot for that. So, having lived in Switzerland for more than 30 years now, I might be expected by you to have an inclination in these type of debates to steer towards neutral ground. But on the proposition today, I find myself firmly on one side of the argument, and I'm really grateful to have that opportunity. And just to inject one quick notion, you'd be surprised how critical I've been over the last few years of what has happened in the ESG space. And I indeed believe that the motion is justified. And I believe that for several reasons. One, I think the ESG backlash globally is justified because we've gone down a route in this field of a level of granularity and prescriptiveness that is ridiculous, I think. And I'll come back later on the maximum average toilet flush water volume that is allowed if you want to classify an investment as green. We've come into a world now that is characterized by taxonomies, box ticking, and compliance. We've become bogged down in debates about which indicator to include into a particular disclosure requirement, whether a fund can be classified as Article 8 or 9, and how to deal with the growing amount of taxonomies across the world. I also think, and I'm picking up your point there, that this motion is justified exactly because the people who've been so deeply involved in it find themselves enmeshed in a complex growing web of rules and standards that increasingly turn their role as being defined by their colleagues in the legal department. I remember having a conversation with a friend who works in the asset management business with a sustainability focus, and he basically said the first step he has to take when coming up with a new idea on a sustainability offering is to the compliance department. This is a catastrophe. And thirdly, I think it is justified because even though many of the things that have been introduced in terms of the regulation of ESG and the standardization may have been well intended, but they have created a false expectation. They've created the expectation that somehow we can define this world, which is fundamentally complex, full of uncertainties, by standards. And I think this is a dead end. And while I'm clearly on one side of the argument, having been in Switzerland for such a long time, I've still listened attentively. And I found nearly nothing in your outline that would contradict the proposition. Because obviously we are in favor of sustainable finance. That is the whole point. The proposition says we've gone down a wrong way that justifies a backlash. And I think it is undoubtable that we find ourselves in the wrong spot. We've lost momentum in the ESG field. This backlash, however, for me, is no rejection of sustainable finance, but an urgent call to reset the conversation. And I want to share three paths or three aspects where I think this resetting is critical. The first one is to broaden the conversation. And I don't think we should move from ESG to EST. I would go in the opposite direction. I think we need to broaden the conversation on sustainable finance beyond climate. Because poor households not having access to affordable banking, that's not sustainable. Credit Suisse and Silicon Valley Bank going down, that is not sustainable. And I'll never forget being at the annual event of the Switzerland Sustainable Finance Association half a year after Credit Suisse went down. A full afternoon talking about the minutiae of carbon credit markets and how to define certain sustainability products, and no mention of Credit Suisse. I think that's absurd. If we want to talk about making finance more sustainable, we need to go beyond climate, and we need to have a comprehensive approach that acknowledges something that I heard earlier today in the afternoon on one of the panels, I think it was the one on polarization, where someone, I think very rightfully so, mentioned that people have different priorities. And I think unless we manage to broaden the conversation, to build a bigger coalition that drives sustainable finance forward, we will fail. The second point I want to make in terms of where we want to go to is that this backlash, I believe, reminds us that finance and sustainable finance is always about judgment calls. Judgment calls about the priorities we want to set, judgment calls about how we see us reaching these priorities, and judgment calls about how we deal with the inherent uncertainties that always are a key part of investing. Judgment calls are at the core of finance. When someone, or to keep in the times, an algorithm decides to buy a stock at a certain price, and there's someone on the other side who sells it at that price, these two make different judgment calls. When a venture capital fund decides to invest into a startup and another venture capital fund decides not to invest in that startup, they exercise judgment. Taxonomies replace judgment calls with checklists. And I think that is also a catastrophe. We're losing the ability of the many in this room and elsewhere who are passionate about making sustainability a critical component of investing, of finance, and we're imposing checklists on them that tell them whether something is green or not green, or transition aligned or not aligned, and that forces them into a binary approach to investing. Binary approaches will not work to make finance more sustainable, because what matters is what happens left and right of that cutoff point. We need to acknowledge there are leaders and laggards, and we need to look at all this on a continuum and then make a judgment on whether we believe, and now I'm coming back to the toilet flush, this new building can be accepted into a green fund, even though the average toilet flush is more than 3.5 liters, because that's what is said in the taxonomy. Finally, and crucially, the backlash highlights that there are no silver bullets. I think over the last few years, we've created the false expectation that we can solve everything with finance. We can have someone in Brussels give us a 550-page document, and then the financial flows will shift. This will not happen. Finance can trigger a lot of shifts, but it's part of a broader package. It cannot drive change fully on its own. Now, at the same time, not to be misunderstood, when the Institute of International Finance says, guys, look elsewhere, we just follow what is happening in the real economy. You should just change the rules in the real economy. Leave us alone in finance. That is also wrong. Finance affects all our lives, our economy, social cohesion, the ecosystems we depend on. And how we govern finance is not just an afterthought, right? What bank supervisors tell banks and insurance companies to do, what regulators tell pension funds and mutual funds to do, and what we do in the whole area of shadow banking, that requires adequate policy frameworks. And that's why I think this backlash is not just justified, but it's an essential opportunity for us all to review where we are, where we want to get to, and how we get there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now call on the second speaker for the opposition, Ellie Herrington of Cambridge University.
Because not a single one of us is coming off lightly in this. I am speaking at the heart of this debate in the center, and I'm going to be talking about the core of what this is all about. Okay. So let me first ask the question, what's in a name? My beloved partner, Simon, says, I don't care what you call me, just don't call me late for dinner. Okay. So when we're thinking about ESG, there are some people named Bob Eccles, who's not in this room, who's ill, often conquered, but I'm still giving you trouble, Bob, who want to convert us to the term responsible business. Fine. A rose by any other name smells just as sweet. But that rose absolutely stinks if it's used to peddle the continuing use of fossil fuels. So I just want to ask, Bob in particular, do you flip tires? Or do you sometimes flip the bird at the environment when justifying the use of things that will poison us? And then also, Bob and I and some other people in this room sometimes hold things that we call girls' nights out. Sometimes I have to remind Bob that the apostrophe goes before the S, and that he is the girl and the rest of us are women. And then I couldn't think of a governance insult, so he's been left off. So there I am. I picked on Professor Eccles, but I've got to ask, who is in the catbird seat? Who's on first? That is absolutely every one of us. So frankly, since I joined the climate club that is everyone in this room 2 years ago, I've been bewildered by the alphabet soup of acronyms that Joe Q. Public outside couldn't give a rat's ass about. A rat's ass. Am I allowed to say that in here? Yep. Yep, fine. Okay, good. Yeah. This is not a matter of intelligence or education, right? I have 4 degrees from infinitely superior institutions called Cambridge. I've published in 10 different disciplines. I'm now an editor-in-chief of another 5. But sometimes I listen to y'all and I don't understand a word that you're saying, right? And that's a massive problem. And also you guys use more acronyms than medicine, and medicine actually saves us. So if we are now using language that can't be understood and is not cared about by people out there on the streets, we're not going to get anywhere. We need to stop using these inert terms, and we need to start doing the hard work of actually delivering on everything that is absolutely within our power. I see a lot of jaw, a lot of debate, but not a lot of war. So I want to ask my opposing members, do you, Nikki, do you have refillable toothpaste, refillable loo cleaner? And Alex, do you live in the most energy efficient house in the village? And Jakob, are those shoes so vegetarian, that they're made out of rope? If you live your values, you can tear down all the naysayers while building the world that we need. That is the first foundation, my challenge not just to the opposition, but to everyone here in this room. If we can't practice what we preach, we need to get off the pulpit, this one. We are all the problem here. To say that these things are not our responsibility, which is something I hear within these rooms, is a cop-out. We just don't have a choice given the all-encompassing nature of the problem. Besides, every person and every organization makes choices. Those decisions, those choices have consequences. Yes, how to level the playing field is a problem. How we govern and how we fund are challenges. How we do things technically is also difficult, such as changing the way we fuel airplanes. But do you seriously want to tell me that we are not inventive? Are you still playing on your Atari? Or have you suddenly developed a budding relationship with your new AI buddy called Dorothy? Hi, Bob. And do you want to suggest that just because the problems are super wicked, that they absolve us of responsibility? The problem we call climate is not going to go away. We all need to hang together, or we will all hang separately. So let me address this question about whether the emperor has clothes. Is what we've been calling ESG truly ESG? Let's be careful to ensure that we are actually adhering to those 3 letters ESG and not the 2 letters BS. For too long, we've also been able to choose our own homework and mark our own cards. But then that is not ESG at all. And give anyone the chance to be slippery with language and money is involved, and money will always win. Language and definition make it easy for emperors to strike back against attempts to better our world, which is what ESG is. And it's true. The effects that we have on the environment, for example, are not just caused in real time, but forward for all time, which is overwhelming when you think about addressing the problems. But being an ostrich is not an option. And yeah, you can kind of look at a field of environment and figure out what that is, and you can kind of look at a field of social issues and figure out what that is. Governance, a friend of mine was telling me yesterday, he said, I have no idea what that is sometimes. And I said, I think it's really easy. Good governance is just like pornography. You can't define it, but you know it when you see it. So I talked about it all being the people in this room, but I do want to address my country. I'm a proud American, perhaps in the future to be known as a member of the 14th province. But I've got to confess, backlash against ESG comes from backwards-looking people who, like some in my country, seem to want to take us back into an era of pro-pollution, pro-life, and pro-government and governments not for the people, but for tyrants, something I thought I would never see in my country. I often think of my grandmother when I'm thinking about the S. She was born in 1891, and when she was of age, she could not vote because women could not. I'm also friends with people who, at the point at which they were born in the United States, would not have been able to vote because of the color of their skin. We need the S. We need the E. Do we want to go back to a backwards era where women belong in the bedroom and never are seen in the boardroom? And this is where I get to pick a little bit on this. Just look at the representation here. We've got 2 women here and 4 men. That is the boardroom in this country still. We have not moved from that. The glass ceiling is still there. So you will hear the opposition saying that we need to be great again by taking us back to that kind of era. But my colleagues in this room, we need to lash back against this in order to ensure that our world moves on, moves forward for all. Do we care if it's called ESG? Do we think that there aren't cheaters? The lazy who refuse to address what they have power to redress? Is the Pope a Chicago fan? Bless his cotton socks. Most importantly, do we think that because ESG hasn't been done well or hasn't been done, that we shouldn't do it and it's not on all of us? There is no justification for the turn against the environment, against the social ties that bind us, and for the turn against seizing leadership with both hands and resting us all in the correct direction. This turn against these fundamentals will kill us all. While we bicker over what ESG means and whether it should exist and who should do it and where, our world is burning. Poor practices drive good businesses into the ground. People die because of bias, and our world is literally burning because of the climate crisis. There is no time to face down existential risk, to oppose facing down existential risk. This is no time to turn away, because there is nowhere else to turn. Esteemed colleagues within this room, I don't care what we call ESG, just don't call us late to the fight that ESG represents. Everyone in this room knows that the responsibility for this world lies in all of our hands and on all of us, because there's no one else coming to save us, and we must all run towards the fire.
Thank you. So now is the time for debate from the floor, which is the opportunity for all of you to vent, to voice your position on the proposition. Please introduce yourself as you do so, and please stick to the subject, as I tell my writers. I encourage you to make clear also what side you're on in making your interventions. Who would like to go first? Perhaps please come to the microphone here at the lectern. Oh, or take that one.
Should I address?
May as well use the...
Yeah. My name is Dhruva. I come from India. I heard both the propositions. I am on the side of ESG. I'm on the side of ESG. The point which is missed out here is all my learned debaters over here, I think you all are coming from a point very clearly from a developed world. The point I want to bring to table over here is, if you look at developing countries, including India, Brazil, South Africa, and Indonesia, if I may talk about them with India as a sort of a kind of a proxy, please understand that S and G have got nothing to do with E. And I think this point was not brought out. I can clearly see a confusion of all of sustainability environment where an S and G existed for ages. What ESG has done is basically something should have been a pass or fail has been made into a score, into an ordinal score, which means that when you did not have workplace safety, when you had accidents at workplace, when you used child labor, when there were no sexual harassment provisions, they were all laws. Today, the scoring, ESG is assessed by ESG rating agencies. The scoring allows you to maybe commit 2 murders and not 10. So let's understand what is happening, and therefore the need is to get to regulation and standards. If I talk of corporate governance, no one ever said that stealing is great. No one ever said that siphoning money from corporate public is good, but these are getting measured of how much you have done today. So what ESG scoring has done is, it has shifted something should have been a qualifier and a compliance of 100% to something which can be scored. And we need to change that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there someone that would like to speak in favour of the proposition that the backlash is justified? Anyone? Anyone else who would like to speak against the proposition? Exhausted already by that debate. In that case, let us move on. And I look to the third and final speakers to close the case, Anthony Hobley of Howden.
Notorious moment in the 2008 Democratic primary between Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and John Edwards. In one of the early primary debates, the moderator asked the trio to what their biggest weakness is. Their biggest weakness. Clinton's response, I get frustrated when people don't seem to understand that we can do so much more to help. John Edwards' response, you know, I sometimes have a very powerful, emotional response to pain that I see around me. Give me a break. Oh, the opposition laments. People don't seem to understand how much we want to help, how much better our work will make the world, how good we are doing. The opposition sings the backlash blues, complain about Mr. Backlash, just as well as Nina Simone did back in 1967. They picked the wrong Nina Simone song, though, of course. I would suggest we go with Nobody's Fault But Mine. I was advertised as a singer, so I feel compelled. It seems to be a disease of our times to avoid accountability. The opposition are proof in point. Who, me? Little me? What, me? Not me, they cry, standing in their own ravaged ruins, recklessly wrought by their flaming fear of being wrong, and worse, irrelevant. Albeit, the lament of the malcontent rings too hollow for this house. Let us review the arguments on the table. As outlined by the first speaker of the proposition, the backlash is fueled by all sides. I understand. In modern society, it has become en vogue to conclude that when everyone is against you, you're doing something right. I hope the House will concur that the currency of such reasoning has about the same credit as the US dollar at the moment. That is to say, none at all. Alex and Nikki have outlined the many errors that justify the backlash. Let me remind the House of the key ideas. We have sought standards over standards without ever actually talking to the people using them. We have defined science-based targets just to have NGOs sue the banks using them. At some point, the stranded assets debate got so out of hand that a large bank suggested total transition risk related to stranded assets could be $100 trillion. I asked the House, what are we doing? Meanwhile, in Europe, we ended up with the green taxonomy that includes natural gas and toilet flushing, apparently. I asked the House, what are we doing? Is some backlash to all this not justified? This isn't a new phenomenon, as Nikki outlined. We launched climate benchmarks back in 2015, some of you will recall, where the largest single constituent was ExxonMobil. We apply thresholds on animal testing that any vegan I talk to disagrees with. We spend our time developing new fancy data sets and platforms, like Father McKenzie writing sermons that no one will hear. We construct scaffolding without the plans to build the house. I ask this House, what are we doing? Is some backlash not justified? Meanwhile, the opposition resembles my 2-year-old who just crayoned what I'm sure he thinks is a dinosaur on the bedroom wall and points flailingly at a stuffed animal in the feeble hope Stuffy will take the blame. Who, me? Little me? What, me? Not me. So let us revisit their arguments and humor this House. Apparently, agreeing with the motion is agreeing with MAGA. Of course, we would also be obliged to agree with the poor and the weak that do not see the fruits of the ESG industry's work at all. We would be obliged to agree with the green NGOs, agree with the disillusioned retail investors who we're apparently doing all this for. Kingsmill claims the ESG are the weak. I don't know where he normally hangs out. But I, for one, don't have the words weak or poor come to mind when I look at this room. And of course, if the opposition had their way, we would apparently decorate the halls of medicines with cranks and charlatans rather than calling out for their flaws in order to progress medicine. The only reason we developed vaccines was because there was a backlash to the medicine of the day. The opposition thinks a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Well, smell these roses. Not sweet. Not sweet. In a sense, the opposition resorts to the worst sins of our industry, greenwashing our actions, risk-washing our impact objectives, impact-washing our risk objectives, you name it, we'll wash it. Our community are the 7 wild washerwomen of John Yeoman's and Quentin Blake's children's book. Or to use the more modern reference, Christina Aguilera is the protagonist in her timeless classic Car Wash. When it comes to washing, they follow Christina's equally timeless advice, work that, pop back, hurt that. Or something like that. Look, folks, this is the 3rd time I'm doing the debate, and my musical references, and indeed my ability to conjure humor, is running dry like an abandoned well, no water left. Maybe all that ESG greenwashing used up the water, who knows. To wit, the proposition does not ask the House to conclude that the ESG backlash is exclusively to blame on the responsible investment community, or the ESG community, or whatever you want to call it, that it is fully justified in all its iterations and inequities. The opposition is, of course, valid in its critique of overreach of that backlash. But where is our sense of self, our sense of accountability and responsibility? In this way, we ask the House to agree that backlash is justified to a degree, not just because it is the correct conclusion, and it is, but also because it is the moral conclusion. It's time to stop singing the backlash blues, dear opposition. We are not scrubs, always talking about what we want, but just sitting on our ass. We are survivors. We're not going to give up. We're not going to stop. We're going to work harder, and we're going to make it. We agree with the opposition that the bad faith actors powering the backlash thought we would be over by now, but we won't stop. Thought that we would self-destruct. But as this summit visibly shows, we are still here. And even in our years to come, we're still going to be here. But to do that, to still be here, to develop vaccines, to fulfill the original promise of ESG or responsible investment to serve this world, to be at the service of this world, to develop vaccines and open heart surgery and to make this world a better place, to realize the energy transition that Kingsmill describes, we must first embrace and channel that backlash. It is what makes us stronger and wiser. In order to do that, in order to channel that backlash, to make the ESG world better, as was outlined by the opposition, and of course by the proposition, in order to do that, we first have to recognize a simple truth, that the ESG backlash is justified, that progress starts within, and that pointing fingers to MAGA or Trump or whoever else is not the way. Because it is true, and because at least my mama taught me better than that. Thank you.
Thank you. And that, of course, was Jakob Thomä of Theia Finance Labs, and Anthony Howley of Howden is now coming to close the case as the third and final speaker.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Baby and bath water come to mind. Or perhaps the 3-year-old who doesn't really like what's happening. La 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 la, it's not happening, as long as I don't see it, hear it, feel it. Was it the 3 monkeys? See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Then of course, the world is not changing. There is no climate change. We do not need frameworks to try and assess what that risk is and to take action. Or perhaps, no, let's wait until we have the perfect system. So we don't want to make any mistakes. Why would we want to make mistakes? So let's just be cautious. Let's sit back. Let's get the perfect framework. So all this stuff we've done, because that's not perfect. It's full of mistakes. It's full of errors. So let's rip it up. Baby, bath water, let's just get rid of the whole lot. Blank sheet of paper. We're going to sit down together and we're going to design the perfect system. And we're not going to do anything until we've got the perfect system, because we don't want to make any mistakes. Nothing we might have to put those right. We might have to look a bit stupid. I mean, I don't know, if we had Alexa here, I'd be saying, Alexa, tell me, is there a perfect system? But I did ask, don't you love the way AI now gives us a little summary every time you Google everything? Well, AI says there are no perfect systems. Maybe there never have been. Maybe there never will be. We can bring all our individual and collective wisdom to redesigning systems, and we will still encounter unintended consequences. So yes, we could rip up ESG and start again, but let me break it to you. That new system, what should we call it? ABC, XYZ, HFG. That's not going to be perfect either. It's going to be just as flawed, because we are human beings. And I'm sorry, if anyone hasn't quite worked this out yet, we don't live in a perfect world. And people who wait for a perfect world and a perfect system, they generally don't get out of bed. We all know people like that. And what have they accomplished in life? The people who achieve things in life, they start with the imperfect. They accept that whatever they're going to do is imperfect. And actually, you learn from that. That's how we progress as human beings. And let me let you into another little secret. The people behind this backlash, it's not because they care about this, not because they're worried that ESG is imperfect. It's actually because they're defending their vested interests. That is what is behind ESG. They don't want it to progress. They're terrified of what we've done so far, because it's going to affect the money and the profits and the business models they've built that are making the problem worse. And they love nothing more than for us to fight amongst ourselves, because that's how they win. So let's not let them do that, because if we rip up everything we have learnt, then they win. The climate loses, and we lose. And it's not directed at my honourable colleagues on the other side here, but to all of us. Do not let us be their useful fools. You know, we are seeing a lot of that at the moment in politics and so on, or useful idiots, I think is the term. A useful idiot or useful fool is a pejorative description of a person, suggesting that person thinks they are fighting for a cause without fully comprehending the consequences of their actions, and who does not realize they are being manipulated by the cause's leaders or by other political players. That's what the backlash against ESG is all about. Make no mistake about that. Do not be fooled into being one of their useful idiots, because you'll be playing into their hands, and you will be playing against everything we're trying to do in terms of driving climate finance in the right direction. I mean, Nikki, you talked about confusion. Well, again, every system, every change in the world, there is confusion, because it's about change. But we address that confusion by learning what we're doing, learning those lessons and driving forward. Alex, you talked about prescription, ideological, but the fact that so prescriptive you can drive a coach and horses through it. Which is it? One or the other? Is it so prescriptive that it's so detailed we can't sort of move? Or is it so not prescriptive you can drive a coach and horses through it? The fact is, we actually have to go forward, not backwards. We have to take the frameworks we've got and move forward, because I agree, there is a problem with ESG. It hasn't gone to the next stage where it has to go, because when people make, we all know this, I mean, many of you probably the majority of you in this room are or will be or are aspiring to be investment finance professionals. When, as a CFO, an investment committee, sitting down making asset allocation decisions, there is only one language that you speak. And that language is dollars, or whatever currency you're working in. What we have not yet done with these ESG frameworks is use them to use those frameworks, take the data, use the new tools we've been given, like AI, and play the climate forward. So we have forward risk curves denominated in dollars for the myriad, and this is why it has to be granular, and we have to address this, the myriad of risks that are relevant to that investment decision you're making. And the industry I am now part of is partly to blame, because it's been MIA, missing in action. It's the one industry that knows how to take data within these frameworks, and it needs these ESG frameworks within which to then assess and produce and price that risk on a forward basis. That is the piece that is missing. But that is not about ripping up ESG and everything we've learned. It's about taking those frameworks and using those frameworks and the data they generate and playing it forward and translating that in quantitative terms in dollars. Once we've done that, then things will change. And I'd like to, we've talked about this sort of backlash, and China has come up. China was not going to make the mistake it made 150, 200 years ago. The Qin court set its eyes against the industrialization that was coming from Europe and the rest of the world. And it said, no, we want to keep our systems, we want to keep our agrarian society, we don't want to disrupt the way society works. And of course, we see what happened. Ultimately, not being part of that industrialization and losing their predominance they'd had for hundreds of years before Europe, well, thousands of years, meant they were weak and exposed to European imperialism. The developing world, led by China and India and other countries, is not going to make that mistake again. They're pushing ahead, whereas it seems to be led by North America and this current sort of MAGA side of things. They go, no, we don't want to change, we want to stay how we are. China, rest of the world, you have the new technologies, you progress. We want to push back against that and stay as we are. And part of that pushback is driven by vested interests, part of it is driven by ideology. And one of the tools to do that is manufacturing a backlash against ESG. That's what we have to stand firm against. So forwards, not backwards. Thank you.
Thank you to the speakers. That brings the debate to a close, and now we will see who has managed to persuade you by the merits of their argument on the proposition that this House believes the global ESG backlash is justified. So voting, I'm told, is simply by the roar of the crowd, and Noah is going to advise me here on the adjudication based on the level of noise, very scientific. So, if I might ask you, those who say aye to now say aye. Do the ayes have it? Aye. Those who say nay, do the nays have it? Nay!
Let's do one more time.
Oh, okay. I'm sure that, is that part of the rules at Oxford? You know, I'm Australian, I don't know, but okay. Do the ayes have it that this House believes the global ESG backlash is justified? Aye. And can I hear from the nays? Nays!
Ben, who won?
Okay, as the chair, I would say the nays have it. Congratulations. I think that's a fitting end in a way to an excellent and thoughtful conference, and we'll give you all a chance to debate further over dinner. I think we've learned an enormous amount about the literally burning and flushing issues, and Ben is now going to wrap us up.
Well, that was fun, wasn't it? Exciting stuff. So big thanks to the teams for their contributions, and a really big thank you to all of you for coming all the way to Oxford and spending all this time here with us. Now, I've got a few thank yous for all the people that have made this happen over many months, actually, but also in particular over the last couple of days. So in particular, the core team. So Patricia, who is, where is Patricia? She's at the match, okay. Well, you must pass on this feedback. So firstly, Patricia is involved in all of our big events, and her team at Gaia, and Claire as well, Claire Holland, do a fantastic job supporting us in this and other things that we do. So thank you to Gaia, and I thoroughly recommend them if you're doing events anywhere in the world, basically. You guys can deliver. But they've also been joined with some core team members from Oxford, Leah Han, Avani Mishra, and Carl Sorensen, who have been working with the team at Gaia for many months on this, and have been in touch with many of the speakers and the panels and the organisers, so thank you. And then we've had a whole bunch of volunteers, students at Oxford, who have been helping over the last couple of days, so let me just name them. Clara Cecil, Alistair Brendan, Maya Greenslade, Oshul Banshal, Antonia Felicia Toffert, Alina Zhang, and Fong Nguyen. So thank you for coming, and hopefully you've enjoyed it as well. And then finally, the tech team at That Event Company for recording all of this. Thank you. And the team, the staff at all the venues we've been at. So at the exam schools, here at the Sheldonian, and in particular, Declan Malloy and Claire Knowles. So lots of people that have been involved, and obviously their colleagues at the Smith School that have also been involved doing social media and things like that. So if we could just give them a big round of applause, that would be great. Okay, well that is a wrap. and we're going to go to the Ashmolean, which is this wonderful museum. We're going to have drinks surrounded by antiquities. This is the oldest museum, I think well, Google it. Oldest museum in the UK, I think, but possibly even further afield. Get the AI to tell us. And then we'll have dinner. And then you get to enjoy all of that. And you'll see us again soon, maybe next year, maybe the year after. Dates TBC, we'll let you know. But thanks again. Thanks, guys.